Afghanistan's foreign minister says he's asked Australia for technological support to help push back the Taliban as the battle to control the country intensifies. The Taliban has seized 3 more provincial capitals as well as a local army headquarters in a blitz across the country, giving them control of an estimated 2/3 of the nation. It comes as the US and NATO finalise their withdrawal after decades of war. Joining me now is Dr. Christine Fair, Professor of Security Studies at Georgetown University in Washington. She previously served as a political officer with the UN Assistance Mission to Afghanistan in Kabul. Dr. Fair, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So what do you make then of these latest developments? Are these moves from the Taliban unexpected, perhaps?
No, they're not remotely unexpected. I mean, those of us that have been paying attention and who haven't been willing to buy Biden's nonsense have been arguing this is exactly what's going to happen. I mean, the United States, I don't even know where one begins with diagnosing this problem, but you know what Biden is saying is just completely fallacious, and I believe he knows this from his time as vice president with Obama. You know, we never actually bequeathed to the Afghans a usable military and a usable set of military capabilities, and I could go on at length about the ways in which we trained them, the insistence that they use American military equipment, which was the least sensible choice to make. These weapons, they are hard to maintain, especially for a largely illiterate force. They are difficult to pay for economically. And so essentially, you know, we've left them with this military that is so large in terms of size that it can't replenish those people that are being killed and defecting. And then I think the most outrageous thing of all is that the Biden administration, continuing, you know, with the Trump administration and quite frankly, Obama before him, you know, we have systematically failed to hold Pakistan accountable. If it were not for Pakistan, the Taliban would be a nuisance. Right? So this idea that the Afghans somehow have to fight for their country while the United States is essentially expecting them to fight with their hands tied behind their backs is an absolute outrage. And many Australians have also, spent time in Afghanistan fighting on behalf of the Afghans. Many Australians have come back injured. Many did not come back at all. And so my sense from looking at the comments on social media from soldiers from all around the world that have served, they understand very well the situation in which we have left the Afghans, and they share my outrage.
Okay, so Dr. Fair, given your concerns and as you've said, your outrage there, it's worth noting that Joe Biden has said he doesn't regret the withdrawal of troops and that Afghans, must fight for themselves, so to speak. But do you think there'll come a point when that changes? Is there any chance the US could switch course and get involved again?
No, so what will happen, of course, is that this is very much a replay of what we saw in the 1990s when the United States withdrew from Afghanistan. Of course, in that conflict, we were supporting the insurgents, right? We were on the same side as Pakistan, and the Russians were in our position. But we withdrew, and we pretty much handed over our policy towards the Pakistanis. We basically put the Pakistanis in charge, which to my view is a little bit equivalent to putting a pederast priest in charge of the preschool. But hey, no one's asking me for my opinion. But that's exactly what we're doing again, right? Everyone knows that it is the unending, unstinting, unceasing Pakistani support, whether we look at military support, whether we look at diplomatic or political support or financial support, or the provision of unending sanctuaries within Pakistan itself. This is why the Taliban are having an easy time tearing through Afghanistan. And I think Biden is also very much to blame for continuing the previous policies of President Trump, which was one of weakening President Ghani. The U.S. had hoped that they were going to put pressure on Ghani such that he would resign, have some kind of an interim government where the Taliban would be given some distribution of power that they did not earn through the ballot box. And so we have a weak Afghan government. We have Afghan national security and defense forces that are not capable of withstanding this onslaught from Pakistan. And we have an international community that thinks their responsibility is over, and they have no interest in holding Pakistan accountable for the slaughter that it is sponsoring in Afghanistan. It is unacceptable.
So how do you see all this playing out? Because I note the country's army chief's been removed, for example. He'd only been in the post since June.
Right.
I mean, what can the Afghan government do to push back here, or is it really a situation where their days might be numbered?
So their days are numbered. I had expected the government to fall within 6 months of Biden being inaugurated, because I had seen the writing on the wall. So I guess they're coming in a little bit behind schedule relative to my estimation because of all the things that I said. The ANDSF are not competent and prepared to deal with an all-out assault of Pakistan's proxies. And what many Americans and internationals will say is that we spent all of this money. It's now time for the Afghans to stand up on their own feet. But what I want your listeners to understand is that all of the money that we quote unquote gave Afghanistan, the vast majority of those monies came back to our countries in our respective countries' contracting fees. Ambassador Holbrooke said before he died that 90 cents of every U.S. dollar allocated to Afghanistan came back to the United States. So this idea that we squandered all of this treasure in Afghanistan and it can't even stand up for itself is just wanton nonsense. The international community, led by the United States, built into the Afghan government industrial strength corruption, because we believe that an Afghan government that was dependent upon our beneficence would be an Afghan government that would act in our best interests. And we are now seeing, now that we no longer have an interest, that Afghan government is really finding difficulty hanging on to power. And I think just finally, what we know from history, Najibullah, who was President Najibullah, who was put in place after the Soviets withdrew, he was able to hang on because he was able to continue paying his bills. For people who don't know anything about Najibullah, he was actually a former Afghan spy master. He had a much stronger hold over Afghanistan than Ghani does today, and he was able to take those payments and keep that country afloat, and was able to hold off all of Pakistan's predations. Ghani is nowhere near the leader, nor does he have the governance capacity that Najibullah had. And it's not clear that this enormous Afghan government that, again, the United States insisted upon building at such a large scale, which is not sustainable, is even going to stick around to pay those bills. So Najibullah hung on for several years. It wasn't until the Soviet Union collapsed and Russia couldn't continue paying him financial subsidies or providing food or weapons for their Soviet weapon systems that he fell. But Ghani is going to fall a lot sooner than that for other reasons that we discussed. And sooner or later, Afghanistan is going to be what it was. And the stakes are going to be higher because we have much more competent terrorist organizations. They've set their eyes on other targets. And so at some point, probably sooner than later, we are all going to find ourselves stuck back in here, just as we did on 9/11. So the failure to learn from history is, I think it's one of the most disappointing things as someone who's been watching this region for more than 30 years.
Dr. Fair, I'm afraid we're out of time, but look, thank you very much for joining us this morning. That's Dr. Christine Fair there, Professor of Security Studies at Georgetown University in Washington.